that I read each week, I conclude by saying the same words. This is the gospel of the Lord. Of course, in most cases, this makes good sense. Not only am I reading from one of the four Gospels, but considering the fact that the word gospel means good news, it seems doubly appropriate. For instance, as we gathered for worship on Christmas Eve, as I read the familiar story from the second chapter of Luke, describing when God sent his only Son into the world, when the angels declared the good news of great joy to the shepherds, and when the shepherds came into Bethlehem to see the newborn Jesus, it seems only right to end by saying, this is the gospel of the Lord. But today, just the 5th day of Christmas, those of us who have gathered for worship have heard a very different story. The story of an unstable tyrant. The story of infanticide. The story of a couple fleeing to protect their young child's life. After hearing this account from Matthew chapter 2, I confess it seems strange for me to end by saying, this is the gospel of the Lord. Traditionally, this first Sunday of Christmas has a special designation. It is affectionately called Low Sunday, because the worship attendance on this Sunday is typically very low. Now, there are several reasons why this is the case. After a busy Advent season with extra worship, some people are ready for a break. With many people on vacation between Christmas and New Year, some people are likely traveling this week. And finally, with the boost in attendance that most churches get on Christmas Eve, any Sunday morning attendance is going to seem low in comparison. But after reading this morning's gospel lesson, perhaps there is one other reason for this lower attendance. While the Christmas account is truly a good news story, this morning's gospel lesson is just the opposite. And so, it is easier for people to just avoid worship this morning and just bask in the glow of Christ's birth among us. But since you have braved it, you have come to worship this morning, you have heard this disturbing passage from Matthew's Gospel. Let me share two thoughts about it, dividing it between the bad news and the good news. Let me start with the bad news, which probably will not come as a surprise to any of you. When God sent his Son into this world, he did not eliminate evil. In the verses that immediately preceded today's gospel lesson, Matthew tells us the story of the Magi. And as you might know, en route to Bethlehem to worship the young Jesus, they first stopped in Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews. For we have observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage. Matthew goes on to say that after hearing this news, King Herod was frightened, but paranoid would probably be more accurate. You see, King Herod was a very deranged ruler, one who killed 3 of his sons because he thought that they were plotting against him. In fact, Augustus Caesar once quipped about him, "You'd be better off to be Herod's pig than his son." And when he learned from the Magi that the child who had recently been born had been given a title, one whom they called the King of the Jews, and when he discovered that the Magi were not returning to him as he had asked, Herod acted in his typical fashion, getting rid of his threat. When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under. The church has sanitized this event somewhat. We now commemorate it, calling it the Holy Innocents. We now refer to these young children as the first Christian martyrs. But I think the title, The Massacre of the Innocents, is more fitting. For these children were slaughtered by a ruthless king. Their parents were left with an unimaginable grief, perhaps never really understanding why King Herod made such a demented command. Sadly, we can look back on this past year and observe much the same thing. Nearly 500 people were killed in mass shootings in our own nation. Thousands were injured in Hong Kong as they protested for their civil liberties against the Chinese government. More than 250 Christians were killed, and another 500 were injured in Sri Lanka as bombs exploded around them during their Easter worship services. No, Jesus coming into the world did not break the cycle of violence. Not then, not now. That's the bad news. But trust me, there is good news. And it is this: God so loved the world that he sent his son, Jesus. And it is in this violent and broken world in which Jesus was sent to save. For God's plan for our salvation could not be thwarted. King Herod tried to get rid of Jesus, but God's angel appeared to Joseph in a dream and warned him, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." And later on, the religious leaders tried to get rid of Jesus and thought that they had succeeded, condemning him to death. watching him be crucified, making sure that the tomb in which he was buried was sealed and guarded. But that could not stop God's plan for salvation either. For God raised Jesus from the dead. And God assures us that even though evil may reign for a time, God will ultimately be victorious. God will make all things new. And that, my friends, is